Hello, good afternoon, LinkedIn. What a crazy day this has been. I have to tell you, I have been feeling definitely not fully myself and a little bit frazzled for a couple of weeks now. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you why, because we're all living the same strange reality. But I'm now at a point where technology is failing me. This morning, we were supposed to have a Zoom meeting with very many people from Influence HR. It didn't work properly. So that was just before 8 a.m., the start of the day. And now here I am about to interview somebody on the topic that's exceptionally close to my heart, the topic of personal branding, and somebody who is an authority on the topic, somebody that I've been wanting to interview for a very long time. Finally locked him in, got his availability, created the event page through which you all joined, felt so great about it, promoted it, then came into the virtual broadcasting studio. He's not there. Wondering why I got stood up, what happened, and then checked my calendar invites and saw that I invited him for a different date and time. Don't leave. Don't leave. This is not all that I'm here to say. I just messaged him and said, mea culpa, times are crazy. Would you, by any strange chance, be available right now? And he said yes. So hopefully he will join me in a couple of minutes. And then in the meantime, I'm going to share with all of you why this topic is so close to my heart. Oh my God, I see that he joined the virtual studio. I'm so grateful. So personal branding. I'm very quickly going to share with you, a bit of my journey. And those of you who know me well know about it. Those of you who don't, I'd love to share it so that you understand that this topic really is something that I authentically am passionate about, and also think that right now it is more crucial than ever. And I'm going to share with you why, and then our guest today is going to chime in with his insight. So you guys know I'm an immigrant. I came to Canada after high school. I was born in the Soviet Union. I grew up in Ukraine. I came to Canada at the very awkward age of 16, when all you want to do is fit in. You just want to be like everybody else. You don't want anybody to think that you're unique or special. That comes later in life. You just want to fit in. And I couldn't fit in. I had an extremely thick accent. My last name always, elicited a lot of jokes and a lot of questions, just couldn't fit in. And then I faced a lot of bias when I found myself looking for my first job. And then I realized that bias was very, very common, something that a lot of immigrants live through when job hunting, without even realizing that that's why the doors are closed for them. Once I started my career in recruitment, I realized that, listen, I had a former boss tell me, Marina, when we look at resumes, we take the CVs of people whose last names are difficult to pronounce, and we put them on the bottom of the pile. He said to me, Marina Bejanova. So you understand that I've seen bias firsthand for myself, and also for my job seekers in the workplace, job search process, etc. And then LinkedIn became a thing. And I realized that I could shape my own narrative. I could build my own personal brand, my own reputation beyond my name, beyond the accent that also subsided over the years, that I could show people who I am, so that they would be less likely to judge me through the lens of their bias. And so to me, taking control of my personal brand has been priceless. It's also brought so many different opportunities. I can share that at a different time. But also today, as I'm consulting a lot of people who have lost their jobs, consulting a lot of people that are trying to become consultants, becoming, going through career transition, career transformation, and they say, how do I do it? What should I change? How do I tweak my LinkedIn profile? How do I change my resume? And I tell them time and time again, that's not enough. But if you do take control of your personal brand, your own narrative, and your own reputation, then you are in control and you can get that dream job. Even in the crazy crisis times, you can become a consultant. You can position yourself the way you want to position yourself. So, this is why the topic is close to my heart. And now, on to introducing my guest. So, 5 times TEDx speaker. That's very cool. Author of 3 books, voted second best business coach to follow on Twitter. Now I'm curious to know who the number one was. I'm also curious how one gets those nominations and awards. Top 7 networking gurus to follow. And not surprising because one of his books is on the topic of networking. Instructor at York and McMaster. And this one I'm really envious about. Inc. magazine top 100 leadership speaker. And there was another thing that I've been so envious about. So you guys know that I wanted to get access to LinkedIn Live for a while. And so first it was people in the US who got it. And I would get those pop-ups saying, person this is live, person that is live. And I would just sit there and feel envious and say, well, it's okay. It's just because it's not in Canada yet. And then I'm sitting there and I get pop up, Bobby Umar is live. And I go, oh my God, he is in Toronto. How did he get it? And apparently he was he was the number 3 LinkedIn user in Canada to be offered the LinkedIn Live feature. So now you see that he has built a personal brand that's powerful enough to stand out and to be noticed. So without further ado, my guest who cooperated despite of my lack of organization today, I'm so excited to introduce to all of you my guest, Bobby Umar.
Hey everybody, excited to be here. Thanks, Marina.
Bobby, thank you for saving this.
No, I'm delighted to be here. Glad we were able to work it out. And I had it down in my, it's funny because you mentioned that Google Calendar, but I have a paper book, and so it's there, and so here I am.
Okay, great. So see, all this technology, that's what's ruining us. We should just go back to our, normal ways of being. I have so many questions for you, Bobby.
Yeah, fire away.
My first one's going to be a very basic question, but so much buzz now and has been for a while around the phrase personal brand. And so a lot of people also are becoming resistant to it and saying, I don't want to hear it anymore. What does it mean? I don't need a personal brand. Becoming resistant, but also skeptical of it. So in your words, how do you define what is a personal brand?
Well, one thing everyone needs to keep in mind is that, every single person out there, professionally, personally, you have a reputation, you have you have a certain integrity around who you are, what you do. You have something that everyone says about you, thinks about you, feels about you, experiences with you, and that's just the truth, and that's your personal brand. Now, I define personal brand as what is your promise to people you come in contact with. So, yeah, I take it more of a proactive stance in the sense that I promise to deliver enthusiasm, warmth, connection, accessibility, and just in my personality. That's what I promise to bring to people whenever I engage them. But the truth is, people say, "Well, I don't have a personal brand." That's not true. Like, do you have a reputation? Do you have how people perceive you in the workplace? Do you want trust? Do you want people to experience you in a good way or a positive way that benefits your business or your company? Well, sure. Who wouldn't want that? Who would want a bad reputation? So that's really what it is. And if you are going to deny yourself and say, well, no, I don't believe in a personal brand, well, then you're just deluding yourself because it exists. And it's actually owned by the people's opinion of you. So you can't even own your brand. The only thing you can do is you can own and manage the perception of your brand, right? So and so I think it's important for everyone to realize that your reputation, it will always be there, no matter whether you're a leader, a CEO of a company, or whether you are a client or a partner or whatever it is you do. How you engage people, how you interact with people. You remember your bad clients, you remember your bad team members, you remember your bad bosses. Well, yeah, that's their brand. So you remember bad family members, bad friends. They build a brand around who they are and how they make you feel. So it's important for you to invest in your brand. What I can tell you is that after I started talking about personal branding over 10 years ago, about 12 years ago, I brought it up. And back then, most people were like, they weren't buying personal brand. They were like, oh, I'm not a bar of soap. I'm like, well, it's not a bar of soap. It's just that it's your reputation. It's how you make people feel, and that's important when it comes to any sort of relationship, personal and professional. That's what it was. And then probably about 5, 6 years ago, now more people are saying, okay, uh, fine, I get personal branding now. Uh, tell me why it's important. Okay, and then I tell them why it's important. It's important for your reputation and for your brand building to get opportunities and to give people a better feeling about you, which then refers you to other people and potentially get more clients, more leads, and more opportunities. And then now I'd say there's still that 10% of people who are like, I don't get it. And then there's about 30% are like, tell me why it's important. I think most people now realize why it's important. Now they're like, okay, now how do I do this? How do I take ownership and manage it and navigate it and build a much better thought leadership brand? So, but again, going back to the original your question, what's the definition? It's essentially your reputation and perception of how people perceive you. But my definition is that what is your promise you deliver to everyone you come in contact with? Make it a
I
good
love
one.
that. I love that angle because I taught a class at Concordia University last year on what does it say? No, put it back.
Work hard and do great things.
I love that. That's
Brought to you by the
awesome.
letter B.
And mine is like something that used to say a hotel name. And there goes my branding. I taught a class at Concordia University last year on social media, and my angle was how to leverage social media to build your own personal brand. And that's when I saw that there was a lot of misconception about personal branding because a lot of people thought that a personal brand meant you were very loud on social media and you were self-promotional. And I was telling people, well, no, because if in real life you are not somebody who self-promotes and somebody who's loud, you don't want to start creating a Gary Vee persona online because then people will meet you in real life and get massively confused. So I love that you're making that distinction, that it's not about putting up an image, it's knowing who you are and then owning your reputation, be that online if you need it to be online or offline and how you're dealing with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the big part of it is whether you're introvert, extrovert, no matter what your personality is, right? Ultimately, you want to be real and authentic in who you are. So, like my wife, who's more of an introvert, her brand is more, she's more calmer, and I'm more extroverted and kind of energetic, and that's like one of my brand elements is my dynamic energy, right? But not everyone has to have that. Other people have more thoughtful, reflective personalities. Other people have more inquisitive personalities. Other people have more, insightful or like kind of nerdy, say intellectual personalities. And that they're all good. They're all good for different reasons. It's also important to know which parts of you are bad. Bad parts of my brand is sometimes I'm impulsive. Some bad parts of my brand sometimes I'm overbearing, particularly in introverts. Bad parts of my brand are that I talk too fast sometimes. So, I work on those things to try to be better at that. A perfect example of a brand that I always tell people to work on is always late Larry. So if you're always late Larry, right, and you have that brand, you know those people. There's people that are always late to meetings, always late to stuff. So if you're always late Larry, uh, number one, first understand that that's true and accept that as true. If that's true and you want to change it, there's the brand that you already are. There's a brand that you don't want them to think of you, and there's a brand that you want them to think of you. And there's that happy middle. You want to make sure you want to move them towards what you want them to think of you. So if always late Larry wants to change his brand, what does he do? Well, statistically, he has to either be on time or show up early 6 to 13 times in a row before people's perceptions start to change. And if he gets to number 8 and then on the ninth time he screws up again, they're like, oh, there's always late Larry again, always late for meetings, and he starts again from zero. But statistically, 6 to 13 times before you can change people's opinion of you. But it can be done. There's certain things you can do with your brand. You can adjust once you're aware, particularly the negative aspects, and other aspects you can kind of embrace. But it's important to know what it is so you can leverage it to your best ability. And then the other piece is once you know what your brand is, then you can design what kind of brand you want, and then start to delivering that out there. And then as part of the whole process of personal brand that I take people through, because I have a signature methodology that I take people through, which is through my company DYPB, Discovery Personal Brand. DYPB, Discovery Personal Brand. You dive deep into who you are, then you design your personal brand, which is looking at your target, your objectives, and your assets, and you work on some skills, and then you deliver your personal brand. You put it out there and monitor the results, and that's an important piece for everyone to be able to do.
I what I often notice is that late Larrys will try to fix their brands not by changing their, actual behaviors offline, but by creating a false perception of themselves online. We can use late Larrys as an example, but I'm
Yeah.
sure, social media is notorious for people distorting reality of themselves and their lives, right? Late Larrys are often the ones that will be writing and sharing the most posts on how it's important to be timely and how it's frustrating when
And they
people
don't do
are late,
it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you'll see it and you'll go, huh, ironic. So yes, it starts not with the social media construct, very similar to organizations that will say these are our values. Okay, well, you put it out there, but unless you're living them,
Right.
everybody's rolling their eyes, right? So that's
Right, and everyone sees through it. Like people can see through that stuff very easily. Most people get when someone's inauthentic. They understand. They can see that. So, you need to respect people's opinions and their abilities to see through that stuff. And if you don't, then you're going to be deceiving yourself and deluding your potential customers.
And so, if I were to ask you, Bobby, what is your personal brand? Have you distilled it into one phrase, or is it like a one pager with different things? What is your personal brand?
Well, I think it's broken down into different things. So one would be, I know kind of my top 5 to 10 personal brand elements about things that represent me. So, for example, when I went through my personal brand process that I have a signature methodology for, I came up with 5 things. Bobby is all about people. Bobby is about performing, presenting. Bobby's about persuasion, influence. Bobby's about nurturing, and Bobby's about diversity.
Mhm.
And if you take those 5 things, and when I distill down into that, about 15 years ago, I decided to become a professional speaker because it screamed to me as one of the best ways to manifest all 5 of those personal brand elements. And it's true. I haven't looked back. I mean, I've been kind of deliriously happy doing it ever since. So which has been great. Being a speaker, being an influencer, going to conferences. I mean, now things have changed, but I'm still doing stuff online. I'm still doing virtual training. I'm still doing online stuff, and it's great. It's worked out really well for me. So for me, there's those are my top 5 personal brand elements. I also have kind of a personal brand statement that I use, which is Bobby's the beacon of light that brings lost leaderships ashore to find their path of passion and purpose. And
Mhm.
so that focus on the idea that some people are feeling lost on the leadership path, and I bring them focus, I bring them clarity, and I get them going in the right path. That's kind of another thing that I do. And then of course the larger scale, yeah. I think my bio is probably lays out exactly what my larger brand is in several paragraphs. But I'd say that's also I mean your life is your brand. And then more recently, what you've been doing the last most in your more recent time, that defines kind of what your brand is and where you're going.
And so, how, and I suppose I would then ask you to share what those steps are in your methodology, the step one, when you help somebody identify what their brand elements are, or for people, our listeners right now, our audience, how would they identify their own brand elements? I suppose that it's number one predicated on some self-awareness, so that
Yeah,
late Larry knows that he is late Larry, right? And then
yeah.
decides what to do that, either take ownership of that and flaunt it or work on it. But so, what are number one? What are the steps for somebody to connect and identify what their brand elements are? And then, are those connected to one's personality traits mostly, or one's personal core values?
Well, it's all of those things. So first off, the discovery piece of the personal brand is the most important one, and it's also the one that is the most ignored by people because they focus on, well, I already know this about myself, so let me just do that. But they don't take the time to actually dive into it. So I actually have I do workshops on this. I just designed an online course on the discovery piece, but I also have a 10-part series on YouTube, which is free. You can take a look at it, basically the 10 tips to know your brand. And so I go through the entire process. I even have a Huffington Post article where I talk about this. But essentially, the deep dive is into a few key areas. So your personality traits, your values, your skills, interests, passions, and the experience stories of your life. That's what I get into. And so that knowing all those things, you have to do a self-assessment of. But you also have to get the assessment of other people as well, because again, your brand is mostly based on how people experience you and feel you and emotionally. And so just because you think you're all this, it may be completely off from what the world thinks.
Right.
And if that's the case, then you're more likely to listen to the world and how they perceive you. And so it's important to have that information. And then the other thing that really helps is doing online assessments. And usually I make recommendations on some of the top 3 to 5 assessment tools you can use to kind of get there and figure that out. And then once you have all that information, and this is where we kind of diverge into getting all this information, and eventually we look at all of it, try to thread things together, and then we converge onto what are the key 5 to 10 elements, what's the key statement we can say about ourselves, and then once we have that, then we can design the brand that we want to live for ourselves. And this is where it becomes really important, because then once you do that, that's when everything, the magic happens. You were saying before, I'm curious how Bobby got 5 TEDx talk, or how he became Inc. magazine, and how he got to be the second best business coach, to follow, blah blah blah, which is great. I can tell you the truth. There's certain things out there that you can go and apply for, or you can pitch to be part of, and I've done that before as a business person. But all those things, the TEDx talks, the Inc. magazine, all that stuff, they just came to me. Why? Because I'd spent the time building a strong personal brand. And beyond personal branding, you want to build what I say is a thought leadership brand. So every single one of you out there should be working building a powerful thought leadership personal brand. And so you understand what your brand is. Now take that, design the brand you want, given your target audience, the value you want to provide, knowing what your assets are, knowing what you want to build about yourself, and then build a thought leadership brand around your area of expertise. And so that's why I work with speakers to build their thought leadership brand. That's why I work with professionals to build a thought leadership brand. And that's why I encourage everyone on LinkedIn to start working. And this is a perfect time. Like, this is the time now that we're all working on building our thought leadership brand on LinkedIn, on our website, on our YouTube channels, or whatever it might be. This is the time to do it. And so I'm highly encouraging everyone to take some time, carve out 5 hours a week, and just start working on building it up and getting information, because I think it's going to be so much value to you once the world gets back to normal and you want to hit the ground running rather than trying to catch up. But ultimately, creating content right now and putting stuff out there and letting people know, here's what I am, here's my story, here's what my expertise is, here's how I can help you. It's going to benefit you tremendously if you do that.
You mentioned just now that it's predicated on thought leadership, right? And you had these opportunities come to you not just because you were building your personal brand and you were out there, but you had positioned yourself as a thought leader, and then those event organizers or publishers wanted your thought leadership, right? They wanted
Yeah,
to.
well, because I can discover my personal brand. Great, now I know what it is. Now what? No, you have to design and deliver that brand. And then once you do that, once you deliver that brand, then everyone will start to know you, right? And that's where it becomes really important to generate leads and generate business.
Okay, but so let me ask you a question. And I asked the same question to a good contact of mine, Dr. Carl Moore. He was talking to me about thought leadership, and that it was important for students today to focus on developing thought leadership. And I said, okay, but the skeptical side of me asks this question. Does everybody have the potential to be a thought leader? And so his response was, in short, well, no, you first need to have thoughts. That's not necessarily everybody. But what's your take on that, Bobby? Do you think, and being really honest, can everybody be a thought leader? Should everybody be a thought leader? Or is it possible to build a personal brand that still you're reaping, we all have a personal brand. I'm saying take control of it and do something with it without the thought leadership component.
Well, it's the same. It's the same thing whether leadership or thought leadership. Can everybody build a thought leadership brand? Yes. Some might take longer than others, right? Do some want to do it? Maybe some don't. Maybe once you've discovered your personal brand, you can then decide now I want to design my personal brand. Now, do I want to design it to be a worker bee and just work for company X for the rest of my life and just be the best worker I can be? All power to you. That's still a form of leadership. It may not, leadership doesn't mean that you are, the CEO of a company. Leadership is just about how you serve and deliver value every day and how you influence people and how you create impact with your work. So you can still be a worker bee and do that. But for most people who are particularly entrepreneurs or business owners or professionals who have ambition to grow in their organizations, if you want to grow in your organization, get to that next level, or you want to take your business to that next level as an entrepreneur or business owner, then you should work on developing a thought leadership person. And so that comes, if you're younger, you can still do it. I mean, there's people like, Swish Goswami. He's like, 22 years old, and he's got a huge brand and generated millions of dollars for his company. He's built a brand even though he's really young. You can do it. I've helped people build up a thought leadership brand in 6 weeks based on where they are. Others might take 3 years, but the point is you can still do it. You can still build it. It just takes time and energy and learning to get to that place.
Mhm. Okay, so what are so step one, you self-awareness portion, and you have to then
Mhm.
identify what your brand elements are, and then following that, what you want your brand to be, right?
Correct.
So going to the more complex side of it. Um, and then what? Then again, people think that the key is to just be posting a lot on LinkedIn, but then some people also want to build their brands not on LinkedIn, right? There are people who are influencers and
Sure.
thought leaders in their own right on
Yeah.
Instagram or now TikTok. So what's the next step that you have with your clients? Do you help them develop a communication strategy, or what are your recommendations there?
Well, let's go back to the second. I mean, your brand is broken into 3 stages. The first one is discovery personal brand. Okay, we got that part. Let's say you've done all that work, and now you worked with me, or you took my course, you saw my video series, or you worked with people, and you figured it out. Great. Step two is now design your personal brand. This is where you look at, okay, now what is my objective or goal for where I want to be in my life, both professionally and personally. Do I want to become the next vice president of this company? Do I want to build my business? What is it do I want to do? And then you look at things like, so then who's your target audience? What's the pain they're feeling? What kind of value can you serve them? What are your objectives in terms of results you want from designing this brand? What are the current assets you have? I'm already a really great speaker. I'm a good writer. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at that. What do you need to work on to build your brand and build your expertise so that you can actually launch this thought leadership brand strategy for yourself or for your company or for your career. And then once you've done that, then you go into the delivery of personal brand, which is, okay, now I'm going to launch this thing. Now, before you launch, you have to have the right strategy. So for some people, it's going to be, well, my target audience is on LinkedIn, and so I'm going to create content there. Or my target audience is on Instagram, so I'm going to create content there. You can't just create content. It's got to be based on your target audience, their needs, the value you serve, and how it aligns with your brand and your story. And that's where the people who are very successful with this have done a good job of knowing their audience, knowing where they are, whether they're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, you name it. Um, they figure that out, and now they really focus on content that delivers value to that audience and start conversations with them, which then lead to business opportunities. So a big part of it is really understanding that whole targeting piece, and then you can decide where you want to go, and if it means doing it on LinkedIn or Instagram or somewhere else, all power to you. Some people want to integrate. Like I integrate. I focus my energy on LinkedIn number one, Instagram number two, and then I have Twitter and Facebook as my other places where I do stuff. But for me, my number one place is LinkedIn. For other people, it may be different. I mean, if you're a baker or if you're a fitness person, any place that has videos and imagery is going to be a really good place to be. So Pinterest, Instagram are really powerful places to be for this type of stuff. Real estate, same thing. It's imagery based. You may want to be in those platforms. So again, it depends on where you are and where you want to go.
And then what do you recommend to your clients as far as I'm sure you get this question all the time because I've heard it so many times. What is the frequency? How often should, let's say somebody just chooses LinkedIn,
Mm.
because to our audience right now, and by the way, anybody who has tuned in and is watching us right now, please do submit your questions so that we can have the guru here answer them for us while he's live. Um, what is the frequency of posts? How often do you post on LinkedIn? Has your frequency reduced since you already built up a big following? What So from the time that you started building your thought leadership brand to the time you started getting opportunities from it, are you able to tell us what that time frame was, and then how much content you were putting out, and what types of content specifically on LinkedIn?
Well, I can tell you that it changes all the time, and part of it's based on my own capacity. Part of it's based on what my target audience wants or is okay with, and it can really it varies from time to time and day to day. But I think that when I first started out, I was doing content on LinkedIn daily. It got a bit exhausting after a while, and I kind of slowed down. And I went down to 5 days a week, then I went to 3 days a week, then I went to once a week. I was like, oh man, I just can't keep up with everything. Um, it doesn't. And then I ramped it up again when I started the live streams. I started doing live streams every day, then realized, oh, this is too much. Then I went down to 3 days a week. Now I'm doing maybe once or twice a week. And then I launched my company page. So now I have a company page which has 20,000 followers. So now there, I was doing stuff. And now, so my system now is I typically do something on the company page Monday to Friday once a day on average. If I miss a day, not a big deal. And then on my profile page, which has 35,000 plus followers, That one I focus on usually just the live streams. So a different focus there, but probably twice a week I might post on that profile. Now, someone like Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, posts multiple times per day, and so influencers get to a point where they can do that, and that's fine. I personally don't recommend that if you're just starting out. I think that the way to go is number one, focus on creating some incredible value, because if it's once a day or once a week or once a month, people will be there for it. Number two, I think it's got to be a little bit more consistent. So I would probably start minimally once a week, so everyone knows, okay, Billy or Sally posts their Monday night thoughts or their Tuesday tips or whatever it is they want to do, and it's consistent. Every week at the same time, they're doing the same thing, and that's where you start to build a little bit of a trend. When I started becoming more of an influencer on LinkedIn, that's what I did. I had a daily LinkedIn tip, is what I called it. And after the fourth or fifth time, people started responding and started getting a lot of traction. Like, oh, this is really interesting. Okay, great. Let me keep doing that. And so I tested and evolved things along. It was mostly text based in the beginning, but then when video came, because I love video, I started with videos right away. And as soon as live stream came, I just started live stream right away. And now actually I haven't been doing very many videos. Although now in the advent of this whole coronavirus COVID situation, I'm thinking of doing short videos again and bringing them back again. So I won't do them very frequently, but I will start doing more of them than I have been lately. So it really depends. But I think for most people, if you have the time and you could do something, more frequently, I don't think you need to do more than once a day, but once a week is good. I think that's a good start. And if you start to get some traction, you can do more often if you like. But again, ask your audience, focus on them, and hey, what do you guys want to do? You want to see this every day? Like, Gary Vaynerchuk posts all the time because his audience loves that and they feed off that stuff, and so he does that. If I get to a point where I have this machine where I just show up and deliver my stuff, and they create because he has a team now that creates all this content, all the nuggets, and they post dozens of times per day. I mean, I don't have that. I'm a solopreneur, so I don't really have that ability. But if I got to that point, yeah, I might do more often. But for now, I'm happy to be consistent with a couple of times per week on my profile and Monday to Friday daily on my company page.
Cool. And you also mentioned the YouTube account. Is that new, or at what point did you create that? And what are some tips? Is it the same? Are those the same videos that you're posting on LinkedIn and then on YouTube, or what's your angle?
Yeah. So I mean, everyone has their own system how they do it, but I mean, they all have benefits for different reasons. So my primary focus, and I did a webinar just the other day where I went through my entire video process. So my process is this: I create content for LinkedIn, video or live stream. Once that's done, then I'll post something about it later that day or maybe the next day on Instagram. Mm-hmm. Then once I've done that, then I'll post it on Twitter and Facebook because that's my third priority. And once I've done that, then I'll upload it to YouTube. And so that's my five different places where I post stuff. YouTube is a place for me to just store all the videos and content that I've created over the years, and I have like 700, 800 videos there now that I've created over the last couple of years. So that's where everything is. YouTube's important because of the SEO. So you do a video, and there's great SEO ranking when it comes to YouTube. But again, primary was LinkedIn because that's my focus. Secondary is Instagram because it's my secondary focus, and then the other places are there because again, I have a large following on Twitter with 465,000 followers, and Facebook. I have a business page there, and I've had it for years, so I post there too. But they're not as big priorities for me.
Mm-hmm. It becomes hard to manage all of those different platforms too, right? Because you want to do things well enough. I'm working on starting a YouTube channel, and then I'm realizing that's a whole other skill set than what I had been using for LinkedIn. Okay, so a couple of questions based on what you already said. So you had mentioned at one point, we'll find out what type of content you're good at, and then that's the content you are putting out there. So if somebody is, let's say, camera shy, there goes the video idea. And let's say somebody is just a really bad writer, or let's say somebody needs to be posted in English because they're, let's say, in North America, but their English is choppy and so has a hard time. So do you recommend to your clients to get ghostwriters or get, I don't know, video training or public speaking training? Or what do you do with those more difficult cases?
Yes. So first off, getting whatever support you can, if you can afford it or fit it in, you should definitely get it. So if you want a ghostwriter, get a ghostwriter. You want someone to do video training and coaching, great. I coach speakers, I coach video trainers and video content. Because the truth is, if you're introverted or really shy, or feeling really shy, and but you need to go to network events to grow your business, or you need to go to sales meetings. You need to be there and on the ball. It's the same thing with online. Video is just live. It's just networking. It's just like an introvert or a shy person talking to me via video like this is the same as talking to me on like at a live networking event. So I would say if you're going to spend time and energy getting good at live networking, you should spend time and energy getting good at video content. I think everyone should get good at it. The good news is for introverts is that you can hone your skills and do as many takes as you want until you feel like you got it right. You can have your own script. You can just have it right in front of you and just kind of read it if you want. But I think video content is 100 times more effective to create a connection with people, to build your brand. So I think everyone should be doing that. And then in terms of getting you to be better at that, yeah, I think there's I have a 7-day speaker confidence course on how to build more confidence as a speaker. I think that people can definitely work on creating better video content. I'm part of a video content creator community where we support each other to give feedback on videos and get better at. But I think that once you do 2 or 3, it's frightening. But then once you do 5 or 6, it's better. And pretty soon you're like, okay, you know what? It's not that big a deal. I can do this with the right coaching, training, and impact. So I think everyone should invest in that. And then when it comes to the writing piece, yeah, I mean, I think that writing yourself is great. But if you struggle with the language, then yeah, I think that you can probably get someone helping. Even on Fiverr, there are people out there that they'll edit your content for really cheap. And what I would probably do if you want to save money is do it all in bulk. Like put together like a document with 20 posts of things you want to talk about, and then have someone on Fiverr, translate it for you, or edit it for you, and then it's ready to go, and you just post it. But I think you can do that as well. I would definitely look for support if I could.
I agree with you when you say that video is really effective and important and is definitely a way to stand out. But I also like that you say that it's not just about that. You need to come out of your shell regardless to be able to, speak to people, speak in front of people in many cases, right?
Well,
This is just
yeah.
the form of it.
Well, and
But
that's why I said, like everyone knows, even introverts and shy people, that they have to get better at live networking events. They have to get better at sales meetings or business meetings at work. And it's the same thing with video content on social media, especially now, in this time and age. If we're going to be inside for the most part, for let's say worst case scenario, 1 year to year and a half, you have to get good at this. So you need to get good at Zoom calls, you need to get good at live stream, you need to get good at creating video content.
I just got very overwhelmed with your prediction there for.
Well, I mean, I'm going worst. We don't know, right? One of the challenges of this current situation is the uncertainty of it all. Right? We don't know what's going to happen or how it's going to, how it's going to eventually get back to normal. I think the getting back to normal will be slow. It's not going to be like, okay, let's go. It's going to be like, oh, okay, trepidatious. Let's go. It's going to take some time.
I agree with you. And again, this is, I said it at the beginning, you mentioned it too. Right now is the ideal time to be focusing on personal branding because a lot of entrepreneurs have to reinvent themselves. They have to pivot, and that leads to completely different, exposure, etc. People who lost their jobs, they have no choice but to stand out in ways job seekers, especially younger job seekers, they're not used to this at all. Because, we went through this where people were struggling to get jobs in 2008, 9, still 2010. But in the last couple of years, economy has been great and people were in demand. They didn't really have to, fight for jobs as they did, a decade prior. So for younger job seekers, this is very new. And the way to stand out is to stand out, right? And take control of the narrative and to stand out. I noticed, Bobby, I thought that it was really interesting that you got certificates in improv, comedy, done some theater stuff.
Yeah.
So you got like an automatic upper hand when it comes to public speaking, because if you're able to, well, first of all, be funny, that is a huge bonus. Because if somebody's not funny at all, like this person right here, and if somebody's also awkward, which, oh, hopefully I'm not that awkward anymore, do you recommend, because I also remember reading a book, and now the name escapes me. It was a book on public speaking, and it was a guy who wanted to become a public speaker, and so he spent the year just doing comedy and improv comedy, so stand-up comedy, so that he figured once he managed to do that, no public speaking gig would ever be scary. So do you recommend that, or what type of public speaking exercises do you do with your clients? Because you mentioned that's also coaching you do.
Well, what I would say is that I think that if you want to become a better, bigger thought leader, then I break thought leadership down to three key areas. One is people who are constantly building broad and deep relationships and connections is one example of what thought leaders do. The second thing that thought leaders do is they are constantly generating new ideas and new content around what their expertise or their brand is. And number three, they're constantly working on their speaking and their writing skills. So you should always be working on honing those things.
Love that.
So what that means is you have to find ways to do that. Now, improv and Second City stuff, that training that I did, was very helpful for me in terms of adaptability, flexibility, humor, and listening to an audience. It's great. It's not for everybody, but it definitely can help you. Similarly, doing something like Toastmasters can be very helpful. Similarly, blogging can be helpful to you. Just doing videos like this, doing panels, interviews, Zoom broadcasts, these are all things that are going to help you hone your skills to be a better speaker, a better writer, and ultimately a better thought leader. In terms of working with people, yeah, I mean, the one thing we look at is, what are your objectives? If the objective is to become a better speaker, then, we'll go through a whole process of, it's really practice, right? It's basically theory, practice, feedback, refinement. Theory, practice, feedback, refinement. Here's the theory behind storytelling. Here's the theory behind opening and closing. Here's the theory behind your visuals and your PowerPoint slides, things like that. Give the theory. Now, okay, now let's practice. So I want you to do a 3-minute talk with PowerPoint on this topic, or do a 3-minute talk on something vulnerable. Let's do this. Then you do it. Now I'll give you feedback. Here's what I saw. Here's what I like. Here's what I think could be better. And then we refine it and go back again. And so that whole process, whether I do a coaching session, because I have a speaker mastermind too that I run, and it's usually set up in a group of 6 people. So with that group, we'll do the whole thing. I'll give them the theory, I'll get them to practice, I'll give them feedback, and we refine it. And that whole process gets them better and better at it. And even within, like, it's actually amazing how quickly people improve. By the 3rd or 4th time, like, there's vast improvement from the first one. And then just imagine how they'll be on the 20th one. I mean, I think about my first TEDx talk, which was now almost 10 years ago, and I look at me speaking, I'm like, oh man, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so bad. But most people really liked it. Like people loved it. But I'm like, I'm way better now. And so it's interesting to see that. But people can improve tremendously if they put the work in.
I agree with you. I look back to my, first attempts at public speaking, and also the feedback that I would get, because you just said, but people loved it. That was not my case. I had somebody straight up tell me, don't do this again. This was not good.
Yeah, and I get feedback too. Like, I'm willing to take feedback. I understand. Like, the general thing with me is I talk too fast, and I try really hard to slow it down when I'm conscious of it. But sometimes I get so excited, I freak out, and I have trouble keeping track of my speed, and I get that. I move around a lot. Some people don't like that. That's fine. There's certain feedback that I take and I resolve, but I understand that there's that feedback that's going to come my way. But what's important is I'm always listening to feedback and I'm taking it in, and I make adjustments as I go along.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that you said earlier, Bobby, is make sure that through your content, you're bringing value. Yeah. And that also, we hear so much of that right now that a lot of people are saying, well, what's value? What's content that's bringing value? Let's start with that. That would be my first question. And then I'll ask something based on another thing that you said. How do you define that? Bring value. What does that mean?
Well, bringing value means that you are addressing the needs and the needs of your target audience. So, for example, I know that one group that I serve with my work is people who want to do public speaking. So one of the questions that they would ask are the things they're struggling with. And one of the biggest struggles with people who want to become public speakers is they don't know how to put together a good personal brand story or a speaker story around who they are. So I'll do a video on, okay, you know what, here's what you have to do to create a strong speaker story around yourself. And I'll just do that because I know that's what they're thinking, that's what they're feeling. And so you create value by focusing on the needs of your target audience and then creating content specifically to answer those questions. That's how you create value. The other way to create value really is to just be authentic, be honest, be vulnerable, and be yourself to showcase, the things that that you're good at, and that and what you can offer, and to do that in a very consistent way versus just blathering all over the place about stuff. You've got to be very focused and to the point. And I think people, I used to do a lot of 1-minute videos, before I did the live streams, and people like to just with a 1 minute, just share a nugget, 1 minute, share a nugget, and put as much value in that 1 minute that I could. I think people like that.
Interesting. Well, also attention spans are shorter, right? Shorter and shorter and
Sure,
shorter.
sure.
So if you can do a shorter one, that's better too. But so then, is it really crucial, would you say, to narrow down and define your audience? Because truth be told, I never really did that. I'm quite present online, but just with things. So the second part of what you said, be authentic, I've led with that. If something feels to me that it needs to be shared, be it personal or professional, or sometimes it is some sort of advice, I share it. It's been a little bit more of that approach. Would you say that's an ideal and it's better to still define an audience and speak to it?
Well, there's a huge advantage on niching your target audience, because if you just serve bankers who are at the C level that are women dealing with product X, Y, and Z, I mean, you could then become the expert just for that, and that could be extremely niche for you, which is great. The problem with being a generalist is that you may get a bunch of small number of people across a broad range who like what you're doing, but ultimately it's harder for them to want to invest time and energy with you, because you're not the go-to one person everyone talks about for that one thing. So, like the stuff I talk about, networking and connection and personal branding and social media, there's a lot of people talking about that. So for me, yeah, I think it's been a challenge as well. But I think that targeting is way more helpful to help you focus on where you want to, because you can't be the person for everybody. So I think it's going to be far better for you to create an audience that's targeted. It helps you focus your content, and it helps you focus on the people you really want to help first. So you think of your ideal client, who you want to help, and that's what you focus on. Now, it could be that you may, like for example, my general target audience is basically senior women professionals around 28 to 50 years of age, right, that are in the corporate space. Now, that doesn't mean I don't work with men, or I don't work with older, younger people, or I don't work with entrepreneurs. I do. It's just that that's where I target all my content for when it comes to creating stuff. But you can still work with people outside that. Just be really awesome at that one niche, and pretty soon it's going to spread everything else.
And so when you talk about defining your personal brand story and being authentic, how much how much do you share on a personal level? How much do you share, not the advice, the tips, the value, but what percentage of your social media content, Bobby, is about you, is about maybe your family or your upbringing or who you are, or
Yeah.
your why, or anything like that?
Well, I think it depends on the place you are. So, for example, LinkedIn, it's mostly professional stuff, or I use the 80-20 rule. 20% of my content might be a personal situation I'm dealing with, or I might share something with my kids, but I usually always turn it into something professional related. Or like just this morning, I did a live stream with Caroline Fernandez in India, and I talked about parenting, and I talked about 3 aspects of the COVID situation affecting parenting, and I related exactly to leadership and professional workplace, because I've been doing that for a long time. So it's very easy to do that. So I usually do 80-20. 20% might be personal stuff, and that's fine, because as long as you're related to your audience in a way that's relevant, that's totally fine. Whereas, places like Facebook is more personal to me. Twitter is everything. So I depending on my audience, I switch it up. But LinkedIn for me, generally speaking, is professional. And then I'll share some personal updates. Like I'll talk about my weight loss journey. I'll talk about my kid's birthday. I'll talk about something that is important in my family, or in a story. But I'll always relate it to the professional workplace in my target audience.
Right. Yeah, I relate to that. Okay. So then, because when I do, for example, today, we were aligned with our themes today. I wrote a post about my kids and the interruptions that I have been receiving, and I was
Right, they
wondering,
interrupt all the time.
yeah,
In
right.
fact, as we're talking, they're whispering, "Daddy, are you done yet? Can I
Right.
ask you a question?" I'm like, so they're like,
And you're like, and so
because I
today,
can't
what happened?
listen.
Right? I felt really vindicated because I barged in on my daughter, who was on a video call with her teacher, and I barged in loudly complaining about something, and she just looked like this and started going like that, and I was like, oh, they
My
came
son
in
did that to me
here.
too. I was in my daughter's room, and I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And then he comes like, "Daddy, I'm on the call with my teacher." I'm like, "Oh, sorry."
Right? You're like, oh, the tables have turned. I feel understood. Okay, so question from our audience. So Josh Edmonston is asking, can you speak about pivoting or evolving your brand over time? When do you decide it's time to change? And then how do you go about that change without losing the audience you've built?
Okay, so going back to my personal brand model that I've created, let's go to the delivery of personal brand stage. This is about putting it out there, monitoring the results, and then reevaluating. So one of the big aspects of personal brand is you should constantly be evaluating and reevaluating your personal brand. So every 1 or 2 years, you should be looking at that in terms of where your values may change, your audience may change, and you have to evolve you have to evolve your brand the way you evolve yourself, because you are going to change as a person. So how do you know it's time to pivot? Well, I mean, when you do the whole brand analysis, and you look at your values, you look at your personality traits, your skills and interests you have, eventually you will see that the stuff that you're doing doesn't align with what you're doing right now, and so it's time to pivot. But generally speaking, it's a feeling, like a feeling of, if you're ever feeling, and I always focus on the three if you ever feel stuck or unfulfilled or lost on where you are right now in a specific, whether it's a position or a career or a relationship or whatever it is, if you ever feel that way, then that's a time for you that maybe you want to pivot.
Mhm.
And another example could be you work with a client, or you do a business meeting. You're like, I found that totally not very satisfying, or there's more negative energy than there's positive energy. And then, these are signs for you to maybe reevaluate things, and maybe do the switch. And how do you go about that without losing your audience? Well, the truth is, depending on your switch, you will lose some of your audience, right? I mean, if you're a real estate guy and you have this huge audience of real estate people, and all of a sudden you decide to become a yoga guru, well, of course you lose people. Not everybody wants yoga, right? But it depends on what you want to do. But that said, if you create a genuine, authentic approach to things and always deliver value, you will be able to transition some people to join you on the journey, but not everyone's going to join you. So I wouldn't focus on that. I would focus on understanding who is your new audience, how do you serve them best, and then deliver tremendous value for them as you transition over. And I also don't recommend a cold transition over. I think that you serve both and you slowly transition over. And that way, you build a relationship with those other people, and eventually some of them may follow you, some of them may not. But some of them who used to follow you may say, you know what, you're not doing real estate anymore. That's cool. You're doing yoga. I have 10 friends who love yoga. Maybe I'll send your link to them. And that relationship is what's going to build you an opportunity to transition people and build newer audiences.
And that's it. And the thing is, with, social media has given us access to so many opportunities, right? You mentioned opportunities coming to you without you seeking them out.
Right.
And so my question to you, Bobby, on that is, I noticed when I was, researching exactly what you do and looking at your business page, I noticed that you cater, you focus on, you have a B2B approach. So your position, and at least I saw on one of your websites, is that, you help organizations by building up personal brands of their leaders, and you list the value that's there, and certainly the value is there. But I know that a lot of organizations are hesitant to invest in that. Like, listen, a lot of organizations are still policing what their employees should be
Yeah.
and should not be posting on social media, right?
Instead of empowering them to become brand agents for their organization.
Right, but then people are afraid. Well, what if they become too much of a brand agent for themselves, and then we're going to lose them, or they're going to say things, that are not representative of the organization. What do we do then? And there's that hesitation. Are you seeing it at all? And then what do you say to those companies?
Well, I think a lot of companies are scared that if you spend time giving, and this is something where as a personal brand advocate, we have to educate companies on this. But one of the biggest fears they have is that, well, if we take our employees through a personal brand alignment project, uh, we're going to find people that are not aligned. They're going to leave. And I'm like, well, you want them to leave. Like, you don't want people that are you
Right.
want people who are not aligned to eventually leave. And if you have good employees and good employee engagement and good culture, they're not going to leave you in a lurch and say, "Well, the hell with you, I don't like you." Like, building relationships is always a good thing. If you're a good company, these people aren't going to leave right away. They're going to try to transition out in an effective way. But I think you want those people to leave. You want to build your company with people that are aligned with your company corporate brand and values. I think that's super important because a lot of people don't think about those things. And then the other thing is, part of it comes from educating and investing in your organization, your employees, like by teaching them how to be good brand agents, to empower them and give them that autonomy. they'll actually most of the time they'll love you for it. Just like they're gonna love you for supporting you with working from home and things like that. If you empower them with tools and training to build up their brands and become buzz agents for it and become influencers, that's great because most of the time if you do that, they're going to influence for you. And eventually, when they do leave, they're still going to speak of you highly. They're probably going to be able to leverage their influence to find you other people to replace them. And I think overall, statistically, it's going to be a really good thing for your company.
Last question I have for you.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering because what I'm mostly interested in finding out when I'm doing interviews, be that for a podcast or in this format, I'm mostly curious in finding out everyone's personal story. And because your why is shaped by something in your upbringing, right? Your early years. There's a reason that you like putting yourself out there. There's a reason you like to consult. There's a reason you're passionate about personal brand and being a
Mm-hmm.
speaker.
Right.
So I know for myself, the reason is that I was born in the Soviet Union, the land of censorship. So I wasn't allowed to express what was on my mind. So now that I'm in Canada and I'm allowed, I can't stop. I can't put a plug on it because now all I want to do is go straight from what's here to, oh, and it's out there, right?
Right.
So I know that's where it comes from. What about you? Were you a talker from young age? Were you always the opinionated one and wanted to kind of be out there and on stage? What shaped that?
Yeah, I think and it's something I talk about in my first TEDx talk. I was always a talker, always social, a bit rebellious, got in a lot of trouble with my parents all the time growing up. I was definitely the rebellious one, and I still am today. I think that's always followed me. But I think the main story that came to my life was the fact that I first started as an engineer. Then I didn't work out. Then I decided to go into performing arts and didn't work out. And then I decided to do an MBA, go into brand marketing. That also didn't work out. And what happened was throughout those three different careers, I felt lost in my first job, I stuck in my second career, and then unfulfilled in the third one. And so by understanding that, that's when I decided to embark on my fourth career by diving into my personal brand. And so those feelings of the feeling lost, stuck, unfulfilled, are something that I think we all feel at different times. And so when I decided to finally dive into my brand, and actually what's interesting is that the story that happened that really pushed me to finally doing this was I was working in corporate and brand marketing, and my wife and I were trying to start a family. We were having trouble, and then I was going to the doctor a lot, and I finally found out that one of the reasons why I had an anxiety attack recently and I was so sluggish and headachy and things like that was because I had diabetes. And I was like, oh man, I didn't really realize that. And so I went to them. I said, listen, my diabetes is out of control. I want to take 2 weeks off to get it under control, and then when I come back, I want to have normal hours because I was working 80 hours a week and it was just exhausting. I want to get down to something like 50 to manage this better. And then within 3 weeks, I got a package saying, see you later. Don't want to do it with you. Not our problem. And I was like, wow, okay, that's interesting.
Wow.
Wow. So it was very, and it really gave me some perspective on what's important. And then the other thing that happened was, so now I'm not working, and my wife a month later got really sick, and she almost died of E. coli, and she was in the ICU for a week, then in the hospital for another week. For 2 weeks, she's in the hospital, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? Like, this is so crazy. And then I took care of her for another 2 months, and during that time, we were like, what's important to us in life? Like, what we need to really re-examine what's important to us in our lives, what we care about. And so that really prompted me to dive into my personal brand and figure this stuff out. And it took about 2 3 months to really kind of dive and figure it out. And that's when I decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to become a professional speaker and trainer. And what's interesting before that, I had never done anything for longer than 3 years and 10 months in anything. But now it's been 15 years later, and here I am still doing the same thing. And I love every day. I love what I'm doing. It's harder now with the COVID situation, but I still get to talk to people. I still get to train online. I still get to do virtual group coaching sessions. So I'm still getting fulfilled. But that story, of going from being lost to fulfilled and then just focusing on what's important to us in our lives, that's really what propelled me to where I am today. And now, every day I wake up with my personal why statement and my motivation and my fuel. And I'm fueled to serve my kids. I'm fueled to serve my audience. I'm fueled to create impact for myself and others. So it's been a great journey.
Do you look at your why statement every morning?
I have it in my head all the time. So my wife's statement is that there are lost, stuck, or unfulfilled leaders everywhere. And what that means is everywhere I go, people feel lost in their jobs, stuck in their career, and unfulfilling relationships. So everything I do, from my parenting my kids to being a friend or being a good son, to my business, to all my coaching programs, to my online tools, my speaking gigs, everything I do, it's all about serving those people who feel that way.
I have so much respect for that and admiration. I think it's incredible. And, you know, it took a crisis and adversity for you to uncover what your why was and your passion and your motivation. And now we are all living through crisis and adversity. So it is the time for all of us to pause for a moment, reevaluate, see where we are stuck, where we are unfulfilled, unmotivated, and take control of our narrative and our reality. Thank you so much, Bobby. This has been insightful and fascinating. I wasn't taking notes because I was listening to you, but I look forward to re-listening so that I can take notes. I really appreciate your time and all of the, you know, all of your learnings and knowledge that you shared with us.
Thanks. I'm delighted to help if I can. And if people want to reach out to me, feel free to follow my company page or follow my profile, or you can check out my websites, rayallen.com or dypb.ca, or just Google me. I'm everywhere.
You are everywhere. And thank you for being here with us as well.
Okay, thank you.